Good morning, you guys. I'm popping on here not in my usual podcast garb because we forgot to get a intro for this podcast, and my Uncle Dwight and Aunt Marilee need an intro because they're just such an incredible couple, and I wanted to introduce you to them myself. So this is my dad's brother, Uncle Dwight. He's been so much fun growing up with, and my Aunt Marilee. They have 10 children ranging from 20 down to 5 years old, and it has just been an incredible experience getting to watch them, being years ahead of us, learning from them, watching them work as a couple to grow Ben Soap Company. Some of you guys might have heard of Ben Soap Company. If you haven't, then you should check it out. Just look at the reviews on their website and those will sell you, because there are thousands of insane before and afters, incredible reviews, and you aren't going to want to buy another soap afterwards. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoy hearing their story. They've moved across country. They've started multiple businesses together working as a couple. They're someone that Elisha and I look to spiritually, socially. They're incredible. Hospitality wise, loving on people. They're both so flexible. They've done so many different things with their lives, and I think it's going to be encouraging to you to hear how they have raised their 10 children and are currently raising their 10 children, and how they have worked together all of these years. So anyways, enjoy this episode. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoy it. Share it with someone you know. Check out Ben Soap, and we will see you on the podcast.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
All right. Well, Uncle Dwight, Aunt Marilee, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and to talk about life. I know that our audience is going to be able to learn and gain a lot from your guys' insight and your guys' experiences. But I'll say selfishly, I've been looking forward to this conversation because I actually have no clue what you guys are up to in your life right now. And even though we do get to see you in passing a couple times a year, it's rare that I get to have a conversation with you because the nature of those events are usually pretty busy and there's 1,000 other people to talk to. So I'm sure I'm going to ask some questions that maybe aren't of general interest to our audience, but are of particular interest to me and maybe Katie too. But with all that said, could you in your own words, maybe, I did a brief introduction as to what you guys are doing, how long you've been married, but in your own words, when you bump into old friends and they ask you what you're up to, what's the answer these days?
You want to take that?
Well, sure. I'll start out. We moved for the first time, across country for the first time. We've lived in Oregon our entire marriage, and we moved to Tennessee. So we are now in the Midwest, I guess they call it. It's not the Middle East, it's the Midwest, although it feels more East. But and we're loving it. I actually love it out here. We've really enjoyed the people we've met. We've enjoyed the culture and the communities. And the weather, I've really enjoyed that, and our children are thriving, and we're knee deep in the next adventure of life. So it's been fun.
It's been an absolute blast. And people ask me what's the weather like back here. It reminds me of growing up in California, honestly, with a little bit of that tropic flair. So you have a little more humidity. So it feels, we're out on the golf course and I go, this feels like I'm in Hawaii. Like I absolutely love it. It's been wonderful. And it's funny in the winter, the harsh winter down here. My kids are diving in the creek and having fun, and the neighbors think they've lost their marbles because they think it's cold. They're not used to actual cold. So it's been fun. We've been embracing the culture, embracing the people. Southern hospitality is a real thing. I mean, people take time to talk. Some has more time than you have, but they love to talk and just share everything that's going on in their life and ask a lot of questions. But when people ask what's going on in my life, I normally try to turn the conversation back to them because I get kind of confused and overwhelmed by my life sometimes. So I just would rather hear what's going on in theirs.
As usual, we're all just like, whoosh, coming along.
Well, we've missed your family because, we both were in Bend, Oregon for a while. Then we ended up in Idaho. You guys ended up in Tennessee. And yeah, it's just like, it's not so often we get to connect, but you mentioned that the neighbors mentioned your kids maybe have lost their marbles or think that. And I just think back to when you lived in Bend and you had your kids jumping off the roof onto trampolines and doing flips off the trampolines onto pads. They're like the most coordinated kids I've ever seen. And they were little. And I'm just like, yeah, I think the neighbors have always probably thought that. Your kids are always like pushing the limits.
Yeah, and that's something that I know comes, actually, to that really quick. How has that dynamic been, Marilee and, Dwight? Because If I'm not mistaken, Dwight, you've been a thrill seeker for much of your life. You've taken risks, physical risks, jumped off high places, gone fast on vehicles, and so forth. And so it made sense on that hand that your sons kind of took after you from a young age. Marilee, what was your attitude towards those things, currently and when your children were young?
Well, I definitely was raised in a much different environment. So I was like not a risk taker. I was very quiet, very shy, very by the rules and risk adverse. Is that right? It was kind of, and so that's how I grew up, but I was very attracted to him for many reasons. I just thought he was wonderful and I enjoyed his personality and the risk. And I saw a lot of value in it too. And so when we were raising our children, the little one, once he could start moving, crawling, walking, then we would just sort of kind of encourage him to take risks. I'd just pile the books up. I'm like, jump. Just see, I don't know why that's just like a random thing, but I would remember piling little books up to have him jump, and then he would jump off of things. And I didn't encourage this, obviously. Hugh started it. Then he would just jump off and leap into his arms, and then it was like from higher and higher. And then Dwight would hold him in his hands, and he'd be stiff as a board, and it just became like
On his feet.
yeah. He'd just stand up right like that, as stiff as a board, and balance. And so I became very comfortable with their abilities and what they were developing and their strength and their mobility, their balance. So I thought it was wonderful. And so then as each one came along, they just did more and more, and you tested their limits a little bit more, but not in a bad way. It was always to see if they wanted to do it. And if they did, they would do it. And then it became too, like, people would be like, oh, aren't you afraid? And I was like, no, because they are learning and understanding their own limitations. And I think that's healthy for little guys or little girls. They can learn to develop their own limitations and understand, hey, if I jump off of that, that's too high, I might splat. I'm not going to do that. But if they feel like, dude, I got this, then they go and they're inspired, they're encouraged, they're confident. And I feel like capabilities develop confidence. And so I've seen that with our children, and I love it. I love what's been developed. I'm not super scared about most things, but I do have a hesitation for some. I do have a hesitation for some still. I will just say that. But I won't even tell you what those are.
You're like, they're just so far past anybody's comfort zone.
We're not going to talk about that because you'd be afraid too.
It's mostly if it involves her. Like if you want to have her hop on the back of the motorcycle or go up in the hot air balloon or anything like that, she's like, no, not going there. I'm comfortable with you guys risking your lives, but don't risk mine with you. But it's funny you mentioned that, Elisha, about comfortable with risk. And I think it's like any area of life that if you do it, you don't think of it really as being a risk. When I do things that other people go, oh, that's risky, I never think of it as I'm taking a risk. I'm actually just enjoying myself, having fun. And I think of like musical people who have musical talent. Everyone around is like, oh my goodness, you're so musical. And the people with the talent are like, no, this is just something I do. Like I play the fiddle or I play the piano. It's not like they walk around going, I'm a musician, or some people might, but I just feel like anything that you do becomes normal. And so when the boys were jumping, doing backflips off the roof onto the trampoline, and you don't first day go out and do a backflip off the roof. Like it's something you build up over time, and you build up that threshold, and it builds up your confidence, it builds up your muscle tone, your balance. And so it's just something you kind of do in life. And I think when you stop doing it, you use it or lose it. You stop riding the bike, you can remember how, but it's not as easy as it used to be. And so the more you could stay active and doing things like Orange doing double backflips, double front flip, like he just keeps pushing the limit even further.
Well, they all
Yes.
That's the thing I noticed is, and I didn't really grow up with this at all. I grew up with a bunch of girls in my family, but these boys, they'll do one thing and the other one will be like, well, I could do that. And they'll try it. And then the other one was like, let's try this. And they push each other. And then the older ones right now are pushing the younger ones. Like, you can do this backflip. Come on, I'll spot you. So I love that about it.
I don't feel like I push them much. I really don't. I would do some stuff and I go, hey, if you want to try it, great. If not, no pressure. Because I grew up with three older brothers, and they would push me, and they're like, you can do it. Like you could jump from one shed to the other with a stack of railroad ties underneath. And I ended up in the railroad ties because I come to find out couldn't jump that far, and so if you push people too hard and they fail miserably, it can hurt and it can set them back a little while. And so I just found that I don't push them. I ask them if they're comfortable. Sometimes I'll talk them out of it. I'm like, dude, I don't think you're ready for that. Like, chill out. You could do it next year. I mean, when we left snow skiing, we hadn't gone snow skiing. First year on the mountain, they're all stressed out because they want to pull backflip. And I'm like, dude, learn how to make a turn, learn how to stop, like learn how to do the fundamentals before you start going inverted. And so Orrin was depressed because he didn't do a backflip till his second year skiing. He's like, oh, I'm a slacker. I'm like, no, you're not. You're doing just fine. So they push themselves much harder than I ever pushed them.
Wow, and you brought up an interesting point there that I think it's so great, where it's actually kids are safer when they know their limitations, and that comes from trying things at a small level and building that confidence instead of just going out all of a sudden you're 16, you're peer pressured into something, and you're like, wow, I broke my back, So I think that there's actually a lot of wisdom in there instead of bubble wrapping our kids till they're out on their own and then they don't know what those limitations are for themselves. And yeah, depending on the kid, that could go poorly. I'm curious. Okay, so you guys, you got married. You had a lot of kids. You're someone that we've really looked to because you've had a lot of children in a short amount of time. And we've been on kind of the same trajectory for the last 6 in terms of like very close children. And so I'm curious, what advice would you give to a couple that's married, that you're newlywed or when you're having kids, and then you're having those kids really close together, and how would you encourage them in their marriage and their family? What are some things maybe you're like, oh, we would have totally changed this, or this was really great? I don't know. I'm curious now that you have that 2020 hindsight for this season of life that we're in, what you guys would say.
All right. Many of you like growing in your marriage. Katie and I, whether we like it or not, we want to grow in our marriage. And usually we like growing in our marriage. And one of our favorite resources regarding marriage is Marriage Maximizer. It's a program that Katie's parents collaborated with us in creating. And they actually made a free masterclass for this. So you can watch their masterclass. We linked that below. This in and of itself, Katie and I love. Like, there's so much value in this free masterclass. So check that out below. Find some fun insights on how to grow in your marriage. In the link, you can see it.
My response has always been, congratulations, keep up the good works, and don't let up, because I know it's easy to grow overwhelmed in that first season, especially I'd say 3, 4, right around that, when they're all 3, 4 and under. I think we had 6 under 6. It was pretty, 6, 6 and under. So it's pretty packed in there. But the thing is, children are a blessing. And there's no other explanation. You could look scripture upside down and backwards, which is where you should be finding all your data. And children are a blessing, period. And so when I look at that, I don't see any other area of life where we go, I'm going to limit that blessing. Financially, oh, I don't need that. Food, anything. It's like we want blessing from the Lord. But then when it comes to children, it's like, well, I kind of want to limit that blessing. And I think it's our short-sighted nature. God always is looking at the long-term vision, the long-term, and we say long-term, we're only here for a little while, like eternity's really long. And I just look at these little eternal souls, and I can't think of anything I'd rather pour my energy, time, and resources into than these little eternal souls that God gives you to disciple and raise. And he's just entrusting you with these little people to raise them up and give them back to him is what it comes down to. And so to me, hats off and total gratitude too. I know people are like overwhelmed. Somebody told me the other day, oh, I can't believe I'm having these kids so close together. And I'm like, you have no idea how blessed you are, because listening to this podcast right now, there are people who cannot get pregnant and would long for a child. I know people have prayed for decades for children. Children are such a gift and such a blessing, and we should look at them that way. And yes, they are a long-term commitment. Are they going to take your time? Yes. Are they going to sometimes frustrate you? Absolutely. Are they messy at times? Absolutely. But are they worth it? 100%. And when I look back on my life, I wouldn't change a thing. In fact, I joke with Marilee, we had a couple where we had a miscarriage in between and a little gap. And I'm like, babe, do you think we should adopt? Like, it's just like, I love our kids. They're the best part of my life. So the other thing, real quick, I don't want to monologue, but the other thing I'd say is when you talk to older people, and I've had people when you have such little ones, everyone's like, oh my gosh, your hands must be, can't believe you're doing that. You're nuts. You don't get a lot of encouragement, even from people in the church. And you get them to talk and open up. You ask a few questions. You say you love your children. And within 5-10 minutes, they're saying, man, I wish I would have had more. They're empty nesters. They're longing for more kids, for grandkids. Their kids have gone off to college. They're sitting around going, I wish we would have had more. And it went from, oh my gosh, your hands are full, to all of a sudden they're confiding like you're their counselor. And they're saying, man, if I could do it all over, I would have had a bunch more. So my word to them is hats off, be thankful, thankful, thankful. Cherish the moments. It reminds me of your mom and dad singing that song about cherish the moments, hold them to your heart. It's so precious and the time flies. The time flies. But
Yeah. I would echo that. Just no regrets on having children so closely together. And I think when you're younger is the best time to do it. So just go for it. But I mean, as you get older and the children get older, I mean, they're so delightful and they're such good friends. They have buddies all around them. You're just kind of a mob that just really supports one another and goes through life together. And I just don't have any regrets in that regard, even though sometimes the lifestyle that we've chosen at different times makes it more stressful. Like we're all doing business together, or we're just like scatter crazy because of what we've chosen. Sometimes those things, and in those moments, you're just like, what are we doing? But again, like you just learn to adjust and figure things out so that you don't have that chaos going on. But I don't have the regret with the children. And I'll say something else after you.
okay. All I was going to say is, but you are going to be weird. Like if you're not comfortable being weird, you're probably not man enough or woman enough to have a bunch of kids, because everybody's going to look at you as weird, which is totally okay. Anybody who's doing things according to God's plan is weird, but like organized sports are not part of our life, because to take kids that are 18 months apart or 14 months apart in all those age categories, it's just logistically impossible. And we'd all lose our minds. And so we go, okay, what can we do as a family? What can we do as a unit? What can we get them involved in that's not so isolationist as organized sports and things like that? So it's going to be a different dynamic. And when you talk to people who are normal and have 2 kids and they did every sport and every function and they're going to look at you like you're just the weirdest person on the planet. And that's okay. Enjoy them for what they enjoy and encourage them in what they're doing, but don't get disheartened by people who think that you're completely nuts, because you are, in a good way. In a good way.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. And I mean, isn't that so peculiar that you talk about bumping into somebody in the grocery store or at Costco, and the knee-jerk, I guess, commentary from even well-meaning Christian people is negative towards children, like negative, especially towards many children, and yet you just respond in somewhat of a positive light towards your kids, and they want to be positive because they know deep down that's the most valuable thing in the world. Like it's the most valuable thing, and so to see that played out time and time again, like what you talk about, because we've experienced that as well, really is kind of, I think, an insight into how I think Satan can work in our minds to say like, man, the things that God loves the most, somehow we resist, and kind of like go away from, and yet when you lean into it, the abundant blessing that it is truly, is unparalleled to any other thing in this life. You talked, Marilee, about logistics. Sometimes lifestyle choices didn't necessarily like facilitate, the maybe easy living with a lot of kids. And something I think about, I don't know if this is one of those circumstances, but since I've known you, Dwight, and Marilee, since you guys have been married, you guys have been starting businesses, you do real estate. Ben's Soap Company is like probably one of our favorite products in the world and one of our favorite businesses to talk about. But you've done a variety of things. Neo-Life, that's one of the times when we've been able to interact with you. You are the reason we got into Neo-Life. And so that's which has been a huge blessing in our life. And I could go on and on and on. How has that dynamic been in marriage and in raising children, running businesses? Because that's another area where you are, different, right? You're not just kind of like, hey, I've got one business that I've ran for the last 20 or 30 years. It's like, well, no, I don't know. Ask me tomorrow and I'll tell you. Yeah,
you guys
seems like you're always doing a new venture. So how has that journey been in the midst of marriage and kids?
Well, just to piggyback off the last question too, I think we started out with less chaos. Dwight had already built his Neolife business, and we had a residual income when we first got married, and that was a gift. So we were raising children, and we were together a lot, and that was part of the joy of that season. And I think it's important to recognize the season that you're in. Like we were just making a lot of babies back then, raising a lot of babies. Like that was our season, and we had an income, and he was doing various other building projects on the side with a builder and just doing real estate. He was just kind of thinking about his future and what he wanted to put his time into, but he was with us a lot. And so when you're young and you're starting out and you have an income source already, that can be a total blessing because you have that freedom of space to think. And I remember also not being super scattered and ambitious back then, just being like, we're here with the kids. It was our whole world. Like we didn't have a lot of external ambitions that were taking us away from the family. We were just together a lot, and that was our focus. So it made it easier and less stressful, I think. But then when we did start the businesses, I guess we did a window washing business at first, and we did some more stuff with Neolife, and then we started Ben Soap Company, and it added an element of like, total creativity and projects that we could do together, and a lot of opportunity for growth and for our children to participate. And it also added a lot of projects and stress and extra things that kept us busy late into the night. And so that obviously created more
bonding moments.
We would go up and milk the goats late at night after we put the kids to bed, or we'd like be up labeling soap or making milk baths late at night just to get them out, that kind of stuff. But
what season of life were you guys in right there? Like how old was your oldest? How old was your youngest? How many kids did you have in that season?
You remember because you were our social media girl for like a year, remember?
A little bit, yes. I really enjoyed that. Fall is here. A lot of us are kicking into new systems and routines, and the Get It All Done Club is for the woman who wants to stop drowning in motherhood and wants to start thriving. If you want to have more free time to do the things that you love to do and become more efficient at the tasks that you have to do each day, join the Get It All Done Club. There's thousands of women who have been through the program and who are currently in our private community that is off of social media. I'm in there monthly, live, answering your questions, talking with you guys, adding new content monthly. If you would like to get a little taste of what I teach in the Get It All Done Club and see a behind the scenes of what the program actually looks like, I do have a free masterclass for you guys. It's linked down below, and it will teach you how to have a more peacefully productive home this week.
Yeah, Chance was 3.5 when we started making the soap for him. And so he's probably 4, which would have meant we had 6 or 7.
7, and the other had just been born, I think.
So yeah,
7 or 8.
We did have a small residual coming in. It wasn't like I was sitting around twiddling my thumbs because I was wealthy. That was not the case at all. Like I remember, I think one year we made $24,000 that year. Like we were working things, figured things out. And so I think a lot of times amnesia is a wonderful thing for business owners because you go through some valleys that are pretty aggro. And we jokingly talk about the entrepreneurial roller coaster where it's like, I love what I do. And then other days you're like, dude, if somebody gave me a $20 bill, I'm out of here. Like it has that roller coaster. And so I feel like this could be a whole podcast in itself, just on business, family, the dynamic. My encouragement to a lot of people that aren't really wanting to do a business, that hear other people talking about entrepreneurialism and they think it's just wonderful because it's kind of become this trendy thing. My deal is there is no shame in just having a really freaking good job and making money and bringing home the bacon. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And I feel like sometimes people think one is better than the other. And I just think all work is honorable. And so no matter what you're doing, whether you're fitting pipes or you're out selling cars or whatever it is, if you're doing it heartily as unto the Lord and you're bringing home the bacon, you're my hero. You're doing the right thing. Starting a business, like I had an itch. I like the entrepreneurial side. I like adding value. I like creating products. I like really serving people and seeing people get excited about whatever you're bringing in their life to make it better. And so I think that's what drives me more than anything. I remember when I was younger, I had a business idea I thought that was putting something on mugs because we're in the decorating business. And I had this great brainstorm, but it was a little bit on the edgy side, like not a wholesome, a little edgy. And I remember, Katie, your father, Chad, it was so funny. We were talking and I told him this idea and he goes, Dwight, I have no doubt you'd make millions. Like it's clever, it's funny. But when people ask you how you made your money, are you going to feel good about that? And I remember thinking, oh, no, I'm not. And so to me, it's not about making the money, it's the journey and how you do it. Are you adding value to people's lives? Are you bringing them a better relationship with their spouse, better relationship with the Lord, better health, better, like, what are you doing to add to their life? Because that to me is what is a win-win transaction. And so that's like when we did Ben Soap, it was solving a problem with chance. It wasn't like we were sitting around as chemists in our bathroom going, what are we going to create for the world? It was like, we have a problem. We have to find a solution. We've tried the dermatologist, we've tried all these other things, and it's not working. And I think that's how most true, authentic businesses start. Is a guy's working framing houses, and he's like, we need a better widget, or we need a better tool, or we need to do this different. And out of that spawns a new idea. And so my mom always said, God directs moving ships. Like you got to get the ship out of the harbor and start moving and wind in the sails, and then you could guide it. But you could sit there and play with the rudder all day in the harbor. It's not going to do you a bit of good. So I feel like in life, you got to go participate. You got to get a job. You got to go do something. And once you start living in the real world, you'll find ways you can add your creative bent to it and you can add value to people. And so I love working with entrepreneurs. I love, when they have an idea, helping that come to the market and serve the market. That's really fun for me. I like starting them. Chad teases me, goes, as soon as they're profitable, you don't care. Like you literally like the starting of them. So business is fun. Like it's super fun. And I think that's what we liked about each other so much in the beginning is she's an accountant. She loves business. She loves talking about ideas. And we just kind of, yeah, she's my nerd. But we bonded over it and it was fun. In fact, she jokingly says, I married her so I could get a cheap accountant. And that's not true. She's a very expensive accountant. No, but we have fun. It's a way we interact that we enjoy is doing business together. It's part of kind of who we are. Some people, they go to the park and they feed squirrels or whatever. We just kind of like doing business. So I think it has to come out of what you're passionate about and then using whatever God's gifts are and your unique abilities to be able to create value for people. Yeah, it is an interesting dynamic. I always joke that it's not going to be easy. You're going to get punched in the face. If you're not getting punched in the face, you're not doing life, period. I don't care what you're doing in life, you're going to get hit. So get in the arena, start having fun and figure it out from there. Is part of like we were talking about taking risk earlier, physical risk, driving too fast, whatever it may be, you're going to have to do the same thing in life in other areas. And that's how confidence gets built is learning new capabilities, skills, and figuring out how to add value. But it's going to be rough. Some of our best moments and our worst moments have been around business stuff. It's nothing like a good knockdown drag out over business.
I know, because a lot of young couples, they think, oh, we want to start a business together. And it sounds so romantic and it sounds so fun. And it's adding this total new layer of communication and complexity in a marriage, because you have your marriage you're working through and then you have this business you're working through. And is there anything like looking back, you guys would have been like, oh, that would have been a shortcut, or we would have done this differently, or that would have saved us a lot of headache? Or is it just kind of like, well, you just learn through the school of hard knocks and figure stuff out?
Great question, Katie. I love that. I do feel like a lot of things, the lessons, the mistakes we make are where we grow. It's the hard times we go through that actually grow us. But can we avoid some of that pain? Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I did, and I know, Elisha, I think strategic coach has been a huge gift to me. Being able to be coached by people who are further down that journey in entrepreneurialism. I think what I tell young men all the time, you want to do something, like you want to start a plumbing company. Go talk to some local godly plumbers and pick their brain. And what you're going to find is these guys are such good teachers and they want somebody who wants to learn. They're not like over there hiding their secrets. They want to teach you. They're willing to teach you. And that's why I feel like the important thing is just having the guts to be able to go up to these guys who are further along in life and say, hey, can you teach me some things? Like, ask valid questions, do enough homework where you ask pertinent questions. They will perk up and they will coach you and they will teach you. And so, yes, I think finding mentors is super important, because there's no reason to try to figure it all out by just getting punched in the face. I mean, it's not fun being punched in the face. We want to avoid that. But at the same time, you are going to have those moments where you're like, man, I knew that already and I still did it. Ouch. Like, I don't know why. Coach, one of our things we were talking about was, what were the worst mistakes you made in business? And so we're all writing them down because we all have a bunch of them, so we're writing down our worst mistakes. And then what dawned on us in the middle of this was, those were actually our pivot moments. Those were our aha moments. That changed the direction of our business. That changed the direction of our marriage, or whatever it is. It's those pain points that come into our life that are the catalyst a lot of times to help. It doesn't always have to be that way. Some of us are smarter than others. Like, I'm apparently not the smart one, but there are smart people who can change before the pain. But a lot of us have to kind of get in an awkward spot where we're like, Lord, this isn't working. And then he's able to show us the next step.
Yeah, I think I learned through mistakes too. I think that's how we've learned collectively together.
We're good at making mistakes.
I would say what I wouldn't do, probably more than like learn about it and then apply it. I would just be like, oh, that didn't work. Guess we won't do that. But I guess if I was thinking about business, things that went really well, I think are Dwight having a vision and me recognizing my supportive role in the vision is way better than me taking on too much of the tasks that I feel like I would be helping out with. It just tends to, there's an amount of reliance that he has on like me being able to do some of the tasks, but then if I take him over and I just kind of blaze past, then it becomes a real friction point in marriage. So I definitely have enjoyed when he's leading and I'm like on supportive duty, but it's not always easy for me. I'm a go-getter girl, and I kind of feel like I have details that need to be taken care of, and I could do them all. So it's kind of, that's been probably one of the harder things in our marriage, to try and figure out those roles and the balance. But if we had to do it over again, I think I would just feel like, if I could recommend to anyone, I was like, just come alongside your husband and help make his vision happen without taking the reins. Because I think that's a really good way for a woman to support.
And adding on to that, I think that, like I said, this could be a whole podcast, because there's so many layers. Most businesses don't do over $1 million in revenue. Like, most home businesses don't, and that's fine. I remember it was your dad, Joe Votberg. He told me one time, he's like, and I keep referring to people, that's the thing, people who've been down that road ahead of you that can give you pearls of wisdom to grab onto. But he said, try to stay small. And at the time, I think I was making $30,000 a year. I'm like, dude, that's not a problem. Like,
It's so your dad too.
I'm like, I don't want to be small. Like, this is horrible being small. And yes, being broke is not fun. But also there's challenges, like when you're trying to make the bills, pay the bills, there's a certain level of do it yourself and challenges that come with that. But then there's a challenge of, if your company does have a product that starts to really take off and it's scaling, and you don't have the skill set to be able to scale it like that. So you got to find the right who's. You got to find the right people to hand it off to, and then have the grace and the humility to hand it off and let them become superstars in your company. And I think that's important. Like, if you guys were doing all of the behind the scenes on everything you're doing, you wouldn't have time to even get on the mic and talk to people. And so you look at that and you go, there's certain who's that you have in your life that make your life work and they make it happen. And so I think that's, if you're scaling something, you definitely have to get the right people. You have to get out of their way. You have to empower them to start growing with you. I know a lot of entrepreneurs, they get hung up right there. They can't take it to that next level, and they don't get that freedom to be able to spend time with kids, time with family, time doing the things that are important, because they're the one who does it right. So they do it all themselves, and they've really just essentially nailed their feet to the floor, and their business owns them. Like, they don't own a business. They're self-employed, and they're the ones that are working 18 hours a day. Some guy told me, he goes, I quit my job because I was tired of working 40 hours a week for hardly any pay. He goes, so now I own my own business and I work 80 hours a week for hardly any pay. So there's different seasons in a business, I guess I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think somebody said entrepreneurs are the only people that work 80 hours a week and call it freedom. They're like, man, I love my freedom, you know. In regards to, you know, running the business, now that you have adult children, you've got young children, what has it looked like over the last few years? And all your oldest are sons, right? You've got these boys that have become men. Do you guys find yourself counseling them in different ways where you're saying, hey, man, try this out, or maybe directing them towards a certain career path because of, you know, a certain propensity that they might have? How has that journey been since you know, the difference from 10 years ago, you guys have successful companies now that they could very well just, you know, kind of plug into, I'm sure, right? And just kind of like you could find a role for them on various levels. And that's awesome if you're able to do that. But has that been the case with each child? And what are your plans around that?
Let me go on this one. Yeah, to me, Elisha, that is a huge subject. And it's something we're figuring out. Like if I was sitting here going, I got it figured out, I'm full of it.
Or if they were already launched. Our oldest is 20. And the next six in a row, okay, so there's 6 boys in a row. The youngest is 13. So they're still in that launching season.
And I think what it comes back down to is knowing their hearts, knowing their skills, knowing their talents, and then a lot of conversations. This isn't a formula that we haven't found a test. You know, we haven't found the what are you going to be when you grow up algorithm. It's literally, once again, getting the ship into the current so we can find out which direction it's actually going to go. Knowing kind of what their skill sets are, you can kind of pick some of these things. But I grew up in a generational business. And so I thought I was going to work in that generational business. That's what I thought was going to happen. And then I got to a certain point where I realized this isn't my passion. This isn't where I'm going to spend the rest. Now I look back on the memories there as some of the foundation for everything I've gone on to do. Because I can't believe that my father and uncle let me do some of the things I did running a business at the age I was with the lack of experience. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what they were thinking. Let me do that. What?
How old were you?
I started at 17 managing the company. And I ran it for quite a few years. And they actually stepped out of the company for a while because of health issues and stress, because it was a tumultuous time. And I'm like, how did they leave it in a 17-year-old's hand? I mean, I had to fire half the staff. I had to rebuild the whole company. It was a crazy season. But that being said, it was like drinking through a fire hose. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I learned so many things. And what I also learned is a lot of times with family businesses, people will make good money, but they're trapped into something they don't love. It's like golden handcuffs, you know, and they're literally working, they make good money, but it's not their passion. And I felt like my father and Alan were a little bit that way. I think if Alan didn't work at ceramic, he would have probably been rebuilt cars on a level that would be world. I mean, Jay Leno would be driving his cars. Like this guy was amazing. His eye for detail, just an incredibly talented person who was putting labels on bottles. Like it just wasn't his cup of tea. But that being said, I look at every one of my kids and I'm like, could they work in bin soap? Absolutely. Could they work in, you know, what we're doing with real estate? Yes. In fact, Burnell's learning electrical and plumbing right now. He loves it and he's growing like crazy. He's doing better electrical than the electricians we were hiring. And so he's got a knack. That being said, does he want to do that the rest of his life? I don't know yet. You know, we'll give him time. We'll see if that's the direction he wants to go. But I think it comes back to there's no formula in launching your sons. And I also don't want to just necessarily launch them. Like I want to be part of their journey as they continue as a counselor, if they want my counsel, you know?
So, and he's been working through that. When they were younger, they worked in the business. So everybody knows how to do almost all the facets of the business, and they could run it if they wanted to down the road, and they still could if they wanted, if that was their passion. So growing up and experiencing that, I think was really highly valuable in their development. And the boys would go to shows with them, with Dwight, and learn all sorts of people skills and selling skills and just conversational skills, and are not afraid to talk to people. And I think that's a great skill that they developed. And then on manufacturing side, they know efficiencies. They love efficiencies. They kind of can see where the problem is and sort it out. And and they do really well at following assistance. So they've learned these great things, but like Dwight was saying, he didn't want them to be stuck in an area where they haven't tried other things. They don't know if this is going to be what they want to do. So his philosophy is more to put as much in front of them right now and expose them to a lot of things so that they can decide if they really like something different than what they've been exposed to. And we haven't exposed them to a ton, but they're just learning little bits. And it's kind of fun to see the different personalities gravitate towards completely different occupations. You have one right now that's just very into athletics, and he just is loving going and playing tennis and pickleball with a group of older men. And he's just enjoying that element of it. And then they're teaching him all sorts of things at the same time. And who knows what path that'll take. But
Yeah, funny.
That's not a career yet.
Yeah.
He's still learning lots of things, skills.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think even just the different businesses that you guys are currently in, and I don't even know half of it, I'm sure, but you already talked about manufacturing. Obviously, there's sales and the retail side of things and many businesses, especially product-based businesses. But then in real estate, these are things that have a lot longer transaction lifespan, right? Like it's not just this quick transaction thing where you get the return. And all of those different things, I think, teach a different lesson, right? Like there's an instant payoff maybe in creating a product in the soap house, and then being able to get it to market, get it to the end consumer. A real estate transaction, it could be a lot longer. If you want to flip it, it's going to be a while till you get your return. If it's going to be something you keep, then you might even look like you're in the hole for a long time before, that thing's generating. And so it's cool that you have the different elements of business to be able to kind of plug your boys into at different seasons. I think that's really great.
Okay, I have two questions I really want to get to because these are just things that I think about because both Elisha and I came from big spread families, right? So it's like you have the teens and then you have the little kids. How are you guys navigating that split of just like time and energy and everything? Because like little children need totally different coaching and training and everything than someone who you said is in the launching stage. So how do you guys kind of do that? And then another question I have too that I'm just going to lump in there is, do you guys feel like you're doing anything with the younger half differently than the older half, like intentionally? Or do you feel like, no, maybe you'll look back in 20 years and be like, oh yeah, we did change things up a little bit, but there hasn't been like an intentional shift?
So that is a loaded question, that whole thing. You asked, how are we doing? And I would say not well. No, I'm joking. Kind of joking. It's way different having older men that are working alongside of you in the trenches and then coming home at night and wanting to see their fort they built out in the woods and collect leaves. It's just a totally different mindset. And yet that what you're saying, Kitty, is that intentional bonding with the littles and all they want is your time. They just want your time. They want to connect with you. They want to talk with you. And little Victoria will come in our bed and she'll just talk to us for an hour. And boy, does she have a wealth of information, just very broad vocabulary because she has older siblings. And so she'll use words. I'm like, oh my goodness, how's a 5-year-old know that word? Like, she's just amazing. So they all have such unique personalities. They're an absolute blast to engage with and interact with. I think every family, especially if you're one of the older kids, you'll say, yeah, the younger ones didn't get near the discipline, near the training, near the, and if you asked any one of my boys right now, they get away with everything. I think there is some of that because of twofold. I think one is when you're starting out as a parent, you're kind of micromanaging everything and you're doing damage control on everything because you got 5 of them that are 5 and under and they're just destroying the place. And so you're like spanking 4 butts at the same time and you're trying to keep everything going the right direction. And there's a lot of energy going on. I think as you get some older ones with the younger, it calms the mood down a little because it's not just the 2 adults and then all the it's some adults that are sitting around with them that are interacting also. I feel like the older help teach the younger just by behavior. They can see it. They're a little further along than I am, and I can copy that, and it's a good result. I don't copy it. It's not as good a result. I think there's a lot more caught than taught. And so I do think 2 things happen. One, the parent mellows out because we're a little extreme when we start. We're going to make these kids perfect. And that I think we could overdo it sometimes. And then I think later we realize that we calm down, and then also they are being taught by. And so it does seem like the younger ones get a lot less correction. And yet when I think about it, because you have to kind of step back and take that 30,000 foot view, because anything in life, if you zoom in close enough, there's a lot of volatility, but you zoom far enough back and you can pick up the trend. You look at the kids, you look at their hearts, you look at their desire to know the Lord, desire to love their siblings, desire to do what's right. I feel like the little ones are doing so well because they just have tender hearts and they love their big brothers and sisters, and the older love the little, and to create that family value of siblings should be best friends. And if your siblings aren't getting along, yeah, they're going to have squabbles. That's life. But are they resolving the squabbles like a dog biting each other? Or are you teaching them how to talk through it like humans? That's what separates us from the animals. We can communicate. We can talk through our emotional struggles. And if they can learn that and learn to respect each other's pains or sorrows or frustrations or joys, then they're learning how to be adults, and they're learning how to interact with people when they grow up. And so watching them work together has been really fun to watch. Has it been easy? No. There's times where I'm going, what are we doing? Like I got to figure this thing out. But I found good things in life are never easy. It's something we're going to have to figure out because it's super important. These are 12 or 10 little disciples that we get to disciple for 18 years, hopefully longer if they want us to continue. I'm hoping they want my input for the rest of their life. But you kind of have to earn that by how you disciple them at 18 and under, and more, almost 5 and under. I mean, it's really important those younger years to get them on the right path. But I just feel like time with them is the most important thing. And that goes back to what Joe said. Try to stay little. Like I think the biggest mistake we make is humans is work really hard at being successful and then find out we're missing the definition of success. We're choosing the world's definition of success. We thought it was the big house or the fancy car or the high paying job or whatever it was. And somebody said the other day, you don't want to climb to the top of the ladder and find out it's leaning against the wrong wall. Like, to me, I have no greater joy than to know my children walk in truth. And so whether your bank account's empty or full is kind of irrelevant when you start looking at little eternal souls. And the reminder of that to me was when Holly was born, and she was the only one we had to go to the hospital, and there was some complications, and I was pretty stressed out, and I got the bill and it wasn't a pretty sight. I'm like, oh man, I'm grumbling like a good daddy does, grumbling. And Ty walks up and he goes, how much is it? And I told him, and he looked at me and goes, and little backstory, he always asked me, like, what would you trade for one of us kids? I'm like, there's no money. There's no dollar amount. Would you take $1 billion? No. Would you take $1 trillion? No. Like, there's no replacing a child. They're just worth so much. There's nothing you could trade for one. And he looked at me and he goes, yeah, Daddy. He goes, but your net worth did just go up $1 billion.
Right.
And to have a little 6 or 7-year-old say that was just such a shift in my attitude. I looked at him, I'm like, you're right. This hospital bill is chump change.
Right.
Like, yeah, we had to make payments on it. Wasn't chump change from my real bank account, but as far as my eternal and my children, it was such a small cost. And I think just keeping that perspective of, yes, the older ones, we need to be involved in this transition, but the younger ones, we can't neglect them either, because these years are so impressionable. But then also get them working with each other. That's a huge part. Sorry, I didn't monologue. You go ahead.
Listen to.
Thank you.
I do.
Well, I want to hear from
Yeah, I mean,
Marilee
we'd
has
love to hear from
anything
you,
to say
Marilee, if you have
too.
any more thoughts on that.
Okay, well, he touched on so many different areas. I kind of lost my train of thought, but if I go back to when we were first training the little ones, you're doing everything for them. You're just like their conscience. You're a policeman. You're just like taking care of it, all the needs and all that. And there's a lot of performance-based kind of stuff that I think we're trying to teach them. Like, this is how you do it. This is not what we do. And you're just kind of doing that over and over and over and over with each one. And I may be responsible for creating a performance-based, I don't know. They made me feel like, what is that? What is that? Where they feel loved if they're, non-conditional, conditional love. I may have created one of those. I don't know. But as the younger ones grow up, I think I think I've definitely relaxed in that element. Like there is a standard that we've created and a culture of like, this is what's right. And everybody knows it. And we're very vocal about what we expect of our children. We talk about it. It's communicated, right and wrong, comparing to other things that are going on. Like, is that okay? No, or what the scripture, what does that say? And we talk a lot through these things. So it's not like everyone's in the dark about it. So the little ones catch on. But I don't feel like I focus on a lot of performance with the younger ones. Like I'm not going around saying, no, don't do this, do this, do it. I feel like it's more generally accepted to just do those things and to not do the things that are wrong. But that could create a laziness in a way. So we do have to have conversations occasionally and talk about things again. But it's more just behavior is more well received, like just kind of understood what's okay and what's not. And I think the part that that I feel like I have to work on a regular basis is the relational element. It's like how do you interact with one another in a healthy way? I don't know what else I was going to say.
It sounds like we're now parenting with the think system.
No, I do totally see that like scaffolding though, like that built in, like, okay, you've established the expectations and now there's this peer pressure, there's this family culture, like that's all been created. So child's getting birthed into this ecosystem that you have already, really put a lot of thought and effort into. And so it makes sense. They just start picking up on a lot more instead of you having to create the wheel. That makes sense.
And what you're saying there, Katie, it reminds me of when we almost lost Burnell at 3 in a pond incident. And it shook my world. It's when I realized that I have a lot less control on this planet than I thought I did. 100% our lives belong to the Lord Jesus Christ. And if he didn't save Burnell, I wouldn't have my oldest son. And I can't even imagine, I've told Marilee this 100 times. I couldn't imagine our life, our family dynamic without him. And you could take any one of those boys. And it's like they all add so much to that scaffolding. I like how you worded that. That scaffolding, that infrastructure, that culture that has been created in our family that is helping the younger ones understand where we're going, what the journey, why we're here on earth. Like, what is our point? If it's just about accumulating crud or joy or memories that are abstract, it's like, no, it's about a relationship with Christ and a relationship with others. That's really what it boils down to. And if they could get that, they're going to be okay. Like, I think as parents, we overcomplicate and people always come up, my kid's in college getting a degree, and who cares? And they're really impressed with how smart they are. And you meet their kid and they're like socially adept. And you're like, you know what? Maybe they should just learn to be nice. Be nice to others and love the Lord. Like it's not as complicated as we make it sometimes.
Oh, I wanted to touch on the concept of like, how do we spend our time with our olders and littles? Because that one has taken me off guard a little bit. But I've been enjoying watching what's happening. So the older ones, we have 3 that they're all still living at home, which I find just delightful. And Brunel particularly, and Orrin hasn't vocalized it, but those are our oldest too. They say they want to be around family still and the children to help them grow up and be an encouragement. So I like that they really, to invest in them as well. So I appreciate that about them, but they do have their own interests. So they'll feel free to do their schedule. But our second born, he is really disciplined with working out. And so he'll go with Dwight and they'll work out together. And that's great one-on-one time, or they'll take 1 or 2 other boys. And instead of the whole family doing these family activities everywhere, which is something I imagined, like every night we're going to do a different family activity. Tonight's Taekwondo night, or tomorrow night. Instead of that, which I still got to have a dream for that. Come on. But instead of that, it's like, okay, 1 or 2 will go here, or dad and mom will go with so-and-so, or, Dwight will take one of the boys out with him on an errand and they'll have a lot of quality time. Or he'll take, okay, all the boys, let's go. Got to load a dump trailer and like 5 of them will head off, and then I'll be alone with the little ones. And so it's very different how the time is structured. And then we will do some family activities like, let's all go play Frisbee golf today. And we'll go do that because it's something everyone can participate in. Or boys have been going and doing golf in the morning, a couple at a time, or with Dwight. Or even one of the boys will be like, "Hey, mama, you come with me." So we'll go somewhere. But it's just, that's kind of how it's played out. And that's okay. And it's a lot of fun. And I've been enjoying that season too. So it's uh, different than what I imagined, though. And it's great because I think if everybody was trying to do everything together, we'd all stress each other out. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that is actually and that makes a ton of sense because I think it is easy to get really perfectionistic when it comes to like, this is what I have in my mind as quality family time, and anything different from this, we're missing the mark, rather than you realizing like, oh, this can look a ton of different ways. This can look very different with each child, with each day. And then obviously being able to have those times where, yeah, you are all together and it's really fun and it's special, but that doesn't have to be, 7 nights a week or 7 mornings a week or fill in the blank with that. Yeah. There's one more thing I want to ask, and then, we want to respect your time. You guys, like you already mentioned at the beginning, you recently moved across the country, and I think a lot of people have either done that, especially since 2020, or are considering doing it, right? Because maybe of the politics of their state, maybe because of the culture that they feel like they aren't aligned with, and they want to raise their children in a different environment. What are some things that you could kind of, I guess, get help for advice when it comes to looking for or being aware of if you are going to relocate? If you're going to move away from, you guys had some family that you moved away from. You established your company in that, and you moved the whole business. You had some long-standing relationships that you moved away from. So what are some things you've learned and that maybe you could kind of share as advice for people that are in that season?
Great question. I wasn't planning on moving, Elisha. I literally was one of those guys that was making fun of all the wagons heading east. I was like, I'm sitting there going, whatever. Like our founding fathers went across, not founding fathers, but all the settlers went across country fighting Indians and getting out there and trying to survive and making through the harsh winter. And we're scared of a few people who are confused about what bathroom to use. Like, really? Like, I don't need to run away from this. This is silly. But Marilee was feeling more and more discomfort, especially with almost open hostility towards anything that's kind of a conservative value. There were people getting more and more aggressive in their verbiage and even they were hostile. And
especially when we're so different, I would think when we are just so extreme, it feels like how we raise our children. Sorry to interrupt.
No.
How we raise our children just feels really extreme. And so the more extreme you are in a culture that's shifting more the opposite direction, the more I'm like, when are they going to come after us? So I felt like, hey, Idaho, Montana, let's go.
And I didn't feel like freezing, so we didn't
go north of that wall. He's like, I am not going cold.
Well, and what she's saying there is she was nervous of them. I thought everybody else was going nuts, so I thought we're normal. Like, we're a normal family. Like, if they want to go be crazy, God bless them. Like, whatever, they can do their thing, and it didn't affect me. Like when people come up and get mad at me for not wearing a mask, I'd have fun with them. I'd be like, I identify as wearing a mask. And I didn't just kind of mess with them and kind of make them think. For me, it was fun. But I could understand where she was coming from. She was feeling the pressure, but to me, it was a perfect storm of we were told by the county that we couldn't be doing our business on our farm anymore. They red flagged our property, so we're doing shipping in town, and then they condemned the building because they wanted to put a road through it, which the road needed to go. Like everything was fine, but it was like the Lord just kept closing doors. And I had this where before it was like I had deep roots, I had the deep relationships. I plan on being there forever. Like, I'm just not a mover. And all of a sudden, I felt like the Lord was saying, maybe I have another place for you. And it was weird. And I didn't. It wasn't like, oh, Tennessee or bust. It was literally, I just don't feel like this is my home. And I feel like it's going across the nation right now. And it's a good thing. And it doesn't mean you have to geographically move, but this world is not our home. We should not be sinking our roots too deep into this world because this world is not our home. We're in it, but we're not of it. And so I think that was my wake-up call. Was all around me was this. The saints were feeling mobilized. It felt like they literally were sitting there going, Lord, where do you want me? And my thing is, if he isn't giving you clarity where you need to go, maybe you just need to be ready. Maybe you just need to be ready for wherever he's taking you and not hold on too deeply to whatever it is that you're holding on to, because if that thing you're holding on to may become kind of an idol. Like it might be your identity in the town. It might be your house. It might be your view of the sisters. Like it could be all these different things. And you're like, really, are we holding on to this stuff? Like
just to clarify, the Sisters Mountains.
to hear a few of the sisters.
Yeah.
The sisters now, I mean, there's people who literally get obsessed with their view. And it's like, I couldn't give up this view for anything. And so I think it just comes back to holding it loosely and letting the Lord direct you, and then being willing to go wherever he pulls you to. And when I came back to Tennessee, I was going 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I've been looking back here for a shipping hub. And it was just a shipping location. But the more I was back here, the more I fell in love with the area. And then when we ended up moving the shipping back here, we ended up saying, you know what, we got to move manufacturing too, because most of our customers were East Coast. And so we started looking at that. I still wasn't thinking family. She was like, I'm not stoked in Oregon. We actually bought a house up in Coeur d'Alene for a little while. We were kind of trying to figure out what we were going to do. And when I got her back here in the RV, because I kept saying, do you want to move to Tennessee? She's like, Dwight, I've never even seen Tennessee. Like, I don't know. You keep asking me, but I'd love to see it. And I drove her right through town in our motorhome, and she just goes, I want to move. It was that quick. Like, she just had a total peace about it. And I actually had been falling in love with the place. So I think the Lord kind of works on us in different ways, and he was softening me to it. And as soon as she said that, I just felt the peace. I'm like, let's do it. I mean, worst case scenario, you can always move back, right? So let's do it. And everybody told me, oh, you'll be back. You know, you're going to not like this, the other thing. And we have absolutely loved it. Loved it. And so my thing is, for people looking at doing it, I say, invest in some plane tickets. Go check out the areas different times a year. And then if you can find people that have similar values, preferably already have a community that you could tap into, it makes life that much easier. We did not do that, but I kind of meet people easy. So I know a lot of people in town now, and I love the people in town. They're awesome. Like, not everybody, but I love the people here. They're great. In fact, I took Daddy to our men's Thursday morning Bible study, and he had an absolute blast. Just people with hearts of gold. They're really neat people. But if you could tie in where there's a community and a fellowship that you feel comfortable with, I think it really allows you to meet people quicker. We're kind of now the catching party. Like, I just unloaded 2 semis in the last 2 weeks of people moving back here, and I'm actually storing their junk in my warehouses temporarily while they're trying to move back. And so it's one of those things where I want to be a place where people, if they're moving back here, and this is a plug for Lawrenceburg. If you're moving to Lawrenceburg, look me up. I'll help you get here.
Watch out. Be careful what you ask, what you let people know.
I love the community. I'm running out of warehouse space, though. But I wanted to be a place where people could land, because when we landed here, I had to buy warehouses. I had to rent Airbnbs for staff. I mean, there was a lot of expenditure that came with moving a company and everything that was going on. And so if we can help others that are in that transition, and I think a lot of people in Tennessee in general feel that way, if they can help soften the burden of people landing here, put them up in housing, help them find a property, that's kind of something that I've been having a blast doing. It's been really fun.
It's been an interesting journey, and I feel like definitely from that moment where I wanted to move, like Dwight said, he had no ambition of moving, and I'm the leader of the home, and God's going to direct us through Dwight. So we just sort of, obviously we're waiting, but Dwight ended up moving us west when everybody else was going east. And I was like, oh man, but the Lord really had to do a work with me in learning how to follow and to be like, okay with wherever we were going, because like he was saying, we have nothing to fear. God shows up wherever. He's going to move us wherever. So we need to be faithful to the Lord's plans and follow him where he has for us to go, not just where everybody else is going. And so I feel like that was an important part of my journey as a wife, is just learning to allow the Lord to speak through my husband and to give it time, because it wasn't my timing. I just know so many people moved north and we weren't going. We were staying where we were, and he had no desire to move. And then when everybody else was moving east, we moved west. So it was just like, just let the Lord lead the man and just continue to trust. And I guess just to, not be impatient.
Well, and one of the things I want to add on that is we're all called to different things. And so not everyone's called to run and hang out with people like mine did. Like, that was my theory. It's like, yeah, that's neat. They'll all go over there and they'll sing Kumbaya together. That's wonderful. But some of us are called to be salt and light wherever we're planted. And so I think it comes down to a personal, because I also didn't want to be Lot. in Sodom and Gomorrah, where I'm just hanging out in Sin City because I'm too daggum stubborn to move. And so you're trying to find that balance of, Lord, you want me to be salt and light here where I am and continue to be, because we need God's word spread everywhere. And so maybe I'm a missionary to this area. That's what I was thinking. And then all of a sudden he made it really clear. No, it's time. Like it's in his hands. So I don't want anyone feeling guilty if they're staying put. Just because you have a little unrest, just because you're saying, hey, I don't hold on to the things of this world, God may have them in a place. I know people live in inner cities. There's some friends of ours that live up in Bellevue, Washington, and it's gone completely nuts. And they're surrounded by crazy, and they're the most awesome family. They love the Lord. They're being salt and light to their neighbors, and they just haven't felt the Lord prompt them to move yet. And half their friends have bailed. And so I just look at it and I go, it's a personal journey, just like our relationship with Christ is a personal relationship. And he calls us all to different things. So I don't think there's a formula for it for sure, other than dive into his word and ask him and let him give you the direction.
Amen.
Well, I think that's one reason why you guys have been so blessed and why you've been so successful in so many areas, because I keep hearing you say there's not a formula. And I think that that's true, because when you see people try to live by formulas, very often that lets them down, instead of just going to scripture and seeing what God says about things with an open heart and an open mind. And so anyways, thank you guys so much for being on here today, though. It was fun to have a conversation with you for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start a podcast so I can interview you. I want to hear what's going on in your life, because it's probably way more interesting than what we do.
Yeah, no, but
yeah. Well, we are. Are you guys
start a
going to?
podcast.
Yeah. Are you guys going to Bend for Thanksgiving? You guys going to make the trip, or you are? Great. Awesome.
We'll be there.
We'll be there too. It's a shorter trip for us, so awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Dwight and Marilee. We'll see you guys soon.